Dwayne Greene, man. It is so good to have you here.
Salud.
I am looking forward to this conversation. Like
Me too.
no idea.
Because it's been too long.
Yeah, well, as I said when you got here, you are the triggering event that caused me to realize that I'm a people person, and
You are that. You absolutely are.
so what brings you here, other than an invitation?
Other than an invitation.
What are the threads? What are the events? How did the stars align?
Yeah.
How far back do you want to go on that story?
How far back, exactly? And do we start at the front and come forward?
You never know what people are going to like.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start with that, like, they're going to throw you for a loop. But
Let me do a little of both. How
did you meet me?
I met you when you came to join us for probably church service playing or something else at Cornerstone Pres over on Old Bush River Road.
Yes, but who brought that together?
I do not know.
Rochelle.
Was it Rochelle?
It was Rochelle,
okay.
yes.
Okay. That makes sense. I didn't know.
I met her playing with the Columbia Community Band.
Okay.
And
Love Rochelle.
she was playing with you over there at Cornerstone.
Yeah.
And she invited me over there to do something you wanted to have. It was like cold, I think, too. And maybe we were getting ready to play over at Sluta Shoals for the lights at Christmas, or maybe I did that with her with somebody else.
No, I think this was probably something at church. It was probably some larger choral works that we wanted to have a good ensemble for or something. You know how long it's been, right? I'm not required to remember. It kind of seemed like the new kids on the block still, but that was 20 years ago.
I moved to Lexington in 2004.
Okay, all right, so not quite. Well, it was.
I'll bet it was shortly
20 years
thereafter.
ago, because
I
I was
in
03. I was 03, and I didn't think it was that long before we were together, but it could have been a year, because we started the church there almost immediately. And well, I'll tell you what brought me here, and then we can see how far we want to go back into my sordid past. But
you're not from here, like a lot of people are not from here.
No, but not as far away as you are. I'm from North Carolina. Came here from North Carolina, although I had been moving in a corporate job, kind of up and down the East Coast several times, and it was that job that brought me here as a area manager for a manufacturing company, and that we moved down here from Wilson, North Carolina, and
I've been in Wilson.
Have you? Yeah, in East.
I spent a night with a dead engine.
Oh.
Off of I-95. I have a great little story of Wilson.
Oh. Well, good.
Almost had to tow my vehicle all the way to Raleigh.
Oh.
From a Holiday Inn Express.
Well, see, I knew a guy. If you'd called me, don't know when that was, but
I had a Mercedes ML 320. I was up in Midlothian,
Virginia.
Maryland.
Oh, okay, all right.
Maryland? No, Virginia. Yeah. Outside of Richmond.
Yeah.
And I was at his wedding, and I'd had a water pump failure in the vehicle as I was pulling into, like, just literally like 100 yards short of the hotel that I was going to. Engine died, and I coasted off into a parking lot.
Yeah.
Got into a spot, got a tow. It was a Friday night before it was like the bachelor party night, so I got a tow over to like the Goodyear or something like that, and was hoping that they could get it repaired the next day or whatever it was. It took them a couple days, so I ended up in Midlothian for a couple extra days.
Oh, wow.
And on the way home, I'm coming down I-95 and not thinking much of anything, and I think I was pulling off at the Wilson exit to get gas.
Probably 64, yeah.
And as I was on the off-ramp, the engine quit.
Oh.
And I had just enough speed to coast up the hill to the intersection, coast back down the hill, and loop around into a parking spot at the Holiday Inn Express, where I spent the night. I had a tow come pick me up in the morning. It was going to cost me like $300 or something to get towed into Raleigh.
Oh.
And but when I got up the next morning, it started. And I'm like, thank you very much. Don't need the tow. I went over to the gas station, filled up, got something to eat at the McDonald's. I think I left the engine running.
I was going to say, I'll bet you left it running the rest of the trip.
And didn't stop until I got home. And that's my experience with Wilson. I almost got towed out of Wilson, but I managed to get out on my own power.
Because nobody could work on it there? Was that the reason?
Maybe I just felt like I needed to go to a Mercedes dealership.
Right.
The closest dealer was going to be in Raleigh.
Yeah.
So that was going to be a hike, and it was...
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what are you going to do? I mean,
right.
Your vehicle dies.
Oh, boy. Well,
but that's not what took you out of Wilson. I mean, I hightailed it out of there.
well, we were there for about 3 years. I'm from Asheboro area, originally center part of the state, near Greensboro, hour and a half or so north of Charlotte. And but I had not lived there full time since I was in college, so it's been here, there, up the coast, down the coast. Texas, Ohio, and but if still home, still. As Dan Rather used to say about I'm of Texas. Well, I'm of rural North Carolina.
But you've been in how many different places now?
Ooh,
and you've been here for the longest, I'm going to guess. Maybe except your childhood, but
I think we've lived in about 5 states, and in a couple of cases more than one location in a particular state, North Carolina for sure. So and college was part of that. I went to school in Baltimore and undergrad, and then graduate school in Cincinnati. And
so I saw on your LinkedIn you went to Johns Hopkins, but I'm guessing not as a medical student. And to me, Johns Hopkins is a medical school.
No, it was that was my way to hide the fact that I went to school for music, because where did you say you saw it?
LinkedIn, actually.
Yeah. I didn't feel like it was going to be very helpful there. So the Peabody Conservatory is affiliated with Johns Hopkins University.
I thought that was in Cincinnati. Peabody's with Johns Hopkins. Okay.
Yes, that's in Baltimore.
Okay.
Yeah. And grad school's similar. It's the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, which is on the campus of the University of Cincinnati. So when you're not a musician, you tend to go with Johns Hopkins University of Cincinnati, if that makes any sense.
So you have 2 resumes.
Exactly. Yeah, but what is a
never
music
out looking
resume?
For a job. Well,
yeah.
Music resume is I've spent a lot of time in a room by myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, forget the resume, let's hear you play, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, can you play the chart?
Yeah.
So were you a jazz guy or were you a classical guy?
Classical, straight ahead, yeah.
Was that your desire to be a performer, or did you think you were going to be a teacher? Because those are probably the 2 primary tracks.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. Most of my careers, whatever they have been happenstance, or I like to think providential. And so I was actually headed to East Carolina University, which is a good music school, and also particularly known in North Carolina for turning out good band directors. So I probably was headed to the band director.
Got an East Carolina story too.
Okay. Not that far from Wilson, as a matter of fact, yeah. But I got a phone call out of the blue one day from a guy who introduced himself as a member of the brass faculty of the Peabody Conservatory, and would I be interested in coming up and auditioning? Now, this is my senior year of high school. I think I'd already been accepted at East Carolina. And so I said, yeah, sure. I had never heard of Peabody before, never been north of Virginia for sure, if I'd even been to Virginia by that point. But so I went up and auditioned. I actually loved it from the get-go. I just loved the feel of the place, the size, the people that I met, and was accepted. And so that's where I went to school. And this guy who called up turned out to be the brother of a band director who knew me through some cross-pollination with our high school bands, and I had worked at his school as a low brass instructor and clinician and things like that. So I get this call, and that set that off. And then grad school was in large part so that I could keep practicing and taking auditions. It wasn't, again, I didn't have a great...
I think most people go to grad school. That's kind of...
Is that, okay, well, that's good to know. Well, certainly in music, I mean, it's kind of a way to continue.
It's a way to continue, and for some of them to make a little money while you're doing it. Well, I can get paid as a grad student sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so maybe it won't cost as much to stay in school. Because,
right.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's a life.
Yeah.
Education, I've known a couple of people that are professional students. They're like, they went to college and never left.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my high school friends, in fact, is at the University of Pittsburgh. He's heading up the European Studies, I think, it's department or something like that. He's not a professor, but he's also a musician. He was a trumpet player. Went to Kentucky, and I mean, he still plays. He's got a quintet that he plays with up there outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to him actually in years, but he was one of these people that went to school and never wanted to leave.
Oh. Well, I knew some of those too. For me, it was absolutely... I had had plenty of school by that point, but it was full scholarship. I think a lot of times there's more money available for grad students too, and so it was a very cheap way to keep studying, keep practicing, keep taking auditions, things like that. So I did that 2 years, and then in the interim I did a stint with the American Wind Symphony Orchestra, of which I met a fella who was founding a group called the Texas Brass Quintet, based in Austin, Texas. And he asked me to come down there and be the trombonist in the group.
Did they have a tuba player in that, or did
bass trombone?
I was going to say, because I've been in a couple of those, and brass quintet's probably my favorite ensemble type to play in.
Yeah.
But you really have to have a tuba.
Yeah.
It doesn't work as well with a bass trombone. I've done it a couple of times that way, but man, I love it so much better with an actual tuba.
Yeah, I agree. But this was their, which anniversary? It was a big anniversary year, sesquicentennial, 250, I don't know, but it was a big, and so we played all over the state as a part. That was a great launch for this group because they had all of these things going on,
Were you actually making money doing that?
Yes.
Okay,
but
did you make enough to live on?
No.
So you had a real job.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing about.
It's like, did you hear the one about the trombone player on the way to a gig? Yeah, neither did I. It's just a fantasy.
Yeah, right. Well, the thing with me too is I had such a narrow career goal. It was really not practical at all, but it was what it was. And I can kind of tell you the story that led to that. What even led me to decide to be a music major. I wanted to sit in the back of a full-time symphony orchestra, period. I was just in love with the sound, in love with the music, the repertoire.
It's a nice gig. If you can get that, that is a nice job to have. You can make enough to live on.
Yeah.
You can become a fixture in the community. You have built-in stream of kids that are going to come along to be your students. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to get a lot of supplemental income, meet a lot of people, do a lot of things, and you're you're performing, what, 7, 8 times a year with the symphony or something, and bigger concerts. I know they usually have smaller groups that are out doing a bunch of things, but
yeah.
you get to play some awesome music.
Yeah, but in terms of employment, it would be equate to, well, I'm going to get an engineering degree, but I'm only going to apply to these 10 companies. And in doing that, I'm also going to compete with every other engineering
1,000 other
school
people
in
that are
the
trying to get to
United
the
States.
same one job.
Yeah.
And when you get the job, you have it for life. And you're waiting for somebody to die in order to get a job opening.
And they stay a long time.
Because it's such a good gig.
Jay Friedman is in excess of 60 years as the principal trombone of the Chicago Symphony. I studied with Jay. I love Jay, but I'm like,
dude,
give somebody else a chance. Give somebody else a chance. You know, there's been one trombone audition opening in the Chicago Symphony in the last 50 years, something like that. The second trombone position came open probably in the 80s, something like that.
Yeah, but the pay scale, I mean, Chicago Symphony is here.
Yeah.
You know, South Carolina Philharmonic is kind of here.
Well, it's South Carolina. It's not full time.
Right, but that's the thing. It's like there's only a few big full-time, well-paying
Well, that's what I'm
jobs.
saying. It's that 10 companies that I'm going to compete with every music school in the
world.
United States. Well, there you go. Yeah, because the guy who won that job was from Australia.
I have no doubt.
The guy who won that one opening. So it's amazing. But again, it was kind of if I don't do that, I'll be okay. I'll do something else. But it was a singular goal, and if it doesn't work out, that's fine.
Did you ever have one of those gigs where you showed up thinking that you weren't really prepared and you were just scrambling to do everything you could, and it turned out to be fantastic for you, and it was good because somebody said, you know, that Dwayne guy, he cares about what he's doing. He's working hard at it. You know, even if he, you know, played a few clunkers there, which I know you never did because I've heard you play.
What you described the last time I had that happen was 2 weeks ago. I played my first show in years, and you know, you can't work full time and be in shape and be focused like you want to be. You know, we've had this conversation, and but it was great. It was great. You know, had somebody come up after me and say, "Were you the trombone player? That was fantastic." You know, I was like, "Well, just keep it between you and me, because
don't want the reputation to get out." I remember playing when I was in high school. We did Guys and Dolls one year, and the next year I think we did Carousel, and that was my first introduction to like a pit band environment, and it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, because what I didn't know at the time was you're going to play this big book of music. I mean, you're going to play for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You're a lengthy performance.
Yeah.
And there's 25 pieces of music you're going to play throughout that whole time.
Right.
Now a lot of them are, you know, kind of short interludes from one scene to the next scene or something like that.
Right.
And a lot of the time I found out that you're kind of playing the same themes a lot. So once you kind of get this lick down, you kind of get the rest of it down. But I never played so much as I did. You know, rehearsals for like a couple of months, and then, you know, we did, I don't know, 5 performances or something.
Right. And
it did wonders for me, just from a stamina standpoint. And after I graduated from college and I was down in South Florida, I was playing in a brass quintet down there. There's a big church in Coral Springs, or is it Coral Springs?
Coral Ridge.
Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. There was a guy that had a big TV show.
Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, forget his name offhand. Anyway, I'd met somebody in a business group that was a trumpet player there. He's like, "Hey, come down and play with us down there." Yeah. And I ended up in a quintet, and with a bass trombone player, and the second trumpet player was a music teacher at a local private high school.
Yeah.
And they were putting on Carousel, and he asked me to play the trombone part for that, and it was so much fun
Yeah.
to get back into the pit again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was, I mean, I was somewhat familiar with the music because I'd played it once before. And it was, I mean, I was 28, 30, probably not even quite 30 years old yet.
Right.
And it was really emotional because I'm sitting there looking at the audience of parents of the kids on the stage and just, it was so rewarding to be able to assist in these kids singing their heart out, doing what they could do. Their parents are just kind of loving this environment, and the other people that were visiting. And I'm like, it was emotionally rewarding to be part of something to kind of let these kids shine. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it was something I wish I could kind of go back to do, but that was the last time I ever did a pit environment or musical or something like that.
That's so interesting. I'll circle back to a similar story, but my first professional pit experience was actually with the Kennedy Center Opera Orchestra.
And Kennedy Center story too.
Yeah. Did you break down in that big old parking lot, underground parking? No.
No, but I wore a pink tuxedo and I ran into Gregory Peck.
Okay, well we're gonna hear that one. I'm gonna take my mic off. I'm gonna let you run. But the experience you just described literally was 2 weeks ago. This was for the
scared. It's you have a couple of clunkers and somebody still thinks you did a great job.
No, I wasn't scared. But I did have a couple of clunkers, I'm sure. But anyway, I'm talking about the experience of.
Oh, the rewarding, yeah.
Yeah, this was far and away. Well, not that I've done that many high school experiences, but I couldn't believe the quality of the performing, of the production, and just what you said, the connection of facilitating the audience, and they feel that this is a pretty large church that's now their performing hall over on St. Andrews Road, and it's a Ben Lippen campus, but that was a 3-night gig, and they filled that place up, and just really high quality, and but yeah, it was so nice to be a part of that, the parents and grandparents and fellow students, and just cheering on what was a really, really good performance.
Well, and that's again, it's that human interaction. It's get your thumbs off your phone, folks. Get your nose out of the screen, and get out there and interact with the people, and
and these were
the
kids
energy that's there is so genuine and so. It's so rewarding.
If you do something like that, you don't spend much time in the phone, because these kids had these roles. This was a 2.5-hour show, and these kids had these roles down cold. That was my first impression when we came and sat in to the Sitz Probe, and then the about 3 subsequent rehearsals. They had it down pat. They just jumped right in from the get-go. They weren't thrown by the orchestra. And it was incredibly smooth for a high school performance. Yeah, it was great.
How much rehearsing did you do?
So we did a Saturday Sitz Probe, which is kind of, they sit down and sing, and they're listening to us, and the conductor's pulling it together. And then, let's see, Monday and Tuesday. So it was basically 3 rehearsals, and then the performances started on Thursday, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah. That's pretty typical, and that was the Kennedy Center gig too. And kind of a segue off of that is, I moved out of music, led by none other than the principal trumpet of the Kennedy Center Opera Orchestra. He happened to have a contracting business on the side, and he said, "Hey, you want to do some?" Because you rehearse for a few days, and in case of an opera, the opera may run for a week or two, But again, it's about those 3 rehearsals is about it. So then it's evening performances and a matinee on Sunday or Saturday, whatever. And so the days for these musicians, the daytimes are free for whatever they want to do. Well, Craig had this contracting business, and so I jumped in with him, and we were remodeling bathrooms in Silver Spring, Maryland, by day, and then playing shows at night.
When I met you, you were the general manager at it wasn't CMEX at the time. It was whatever preceded CMEX here in Lexington.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does somebody that plays as well as you do, that went to Peabody and the Cincinnati Conservatory, which frankly I thought were one and the same. I'm glad I learned that tonight. But how you ended up running a cement plant. I'm like, where's the thread there? That, I'm like, really? One of these things does not match the other.
So now people ask me, well, how did you get into the concrete business? And I said, well, you go to music school, of course.
I'm not Italian, so I had to find another way in.
Yeah, you get a fine arts degree. And then when you get tired of the starving artist thing, then you get a real job, right? But yeah, it was actually a musician that led me astray or put me on the path, however you want to look at it.
You're going to need an alternative here.
Yeah. Craig's philosophy was, I don't know how deep you wanted to get into music esoterics here, but his philosophy, he blowing some of these shows, it was at Kennedy Center, it's not just operas, it's not just Tchaikovsky and Verdi and...
No, it's occasional United Way reward nights.
And not only that, it's shows. It's Les Mis. It's whatever. And I mean, first production in Kennedy Center is second only to Broadway, probably, in terms of big shows and premiering these works and things. And some of those things are real blows. I mean, for trumpets, screaming. And he said, I'm not going to be able to do this until I'm 65 years old or whatever. I'm not going to be able to. And he was thinking ahead, like you do often. You plan,
He looks over on the horizon.
You look ahead.
Says,
yeah,
I'm not going to have those chops for that long. So.
Yeah, and so sure enough, he's got a wonderful general contracting business up there now. Does beautiful work, like most musicians that I know who do other things. The quality of their work, whatever that work might be, is spectacular.
You have to pay attention to details.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, if you're a musician of any quality, you are innately paying attention to details, even if you're just doing it subconsciously. Yeah. And that will show in other things.
Right.
You're right. It doesn't, I don't think it ever mismatches.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you're a lazy musician or a lazy person, you're not going to be that good of a musician.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're playing piano, guitar, drums. Well, drums maybe, I don't know. Sorry for the percussionists out there. That's it. John Amerso's never talking to me again. But nonetheless, I mean, that's the other thing I've...
Pizza.
Yeah. It makes really good pizza. Yeah. I cannot tell you how many times I've told people, if you haven't been over to Ray's, Claire and Ray's for pizza, I'm sorry, but you're missing out. My opinion, that's the best pizza in town.
And it's right around the corner for me.
I know that Cavacci's gets a big gathering. Yeah. I know that, what's the other one around here that gets a real big...
Up and comers, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's to each their own. And I'm not necessarily a New York pizza huge fan, but I'm sorry.
I am.
When I moved to this town, the pizza scene was lacking.
Yeah.
Significantly. And it has changed a lot. And yes, Claire and Ray's, in my opinion, be it ever so humble, has the best pizza in town. By the way, they're meatballs.
Yeah, I've had them. Yeah,
they're meatballs.
Absolutely.
Holy mackerel.
Absolutely. It was years before I tried anything but pizza, but once they opened up the larger dine-in, I've tried some actual dishes,
Like
something besides a
baseball-sized
a large
meatball, and I'm like,
cheese.
oh my God, that's
Yeah.
good.
So John Merso was a
Immerso.
was a musician.
I got a John Immerso story for
Have you ever
too.
asked him, how did you get from music to pizza?
Do you have 2 minutes?
Yeah.
So years ago, I played with the airport with the Columbia Community Concert Band over at
Yeah.
Airport High School, and I played with the Lake Murray Symphony, and I had my own trombone ensemble that you played in. You're very familiar with.
Yeah.
And I had
Bones
been
of
playing
Intention.
the Bones of Intention.
Quite a
Met a
great
lot of
memories.
people. I mean, I played in a lot of different places. For a year or so, I played with the Capital City Brass Quintet. I've played in a bunch of different church things. I mean, I'd been around in pretty much everything, and I was pretty familiar, I thought, with the entire music community, at least from the Lexington to Columbia area.
Right.
And
Which is pretty big and robust.
and amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I
quality of the people I've met in this area is just beyond my imagination. So I get my water bill one day from the town of Lexington, and there's a story, tiny little blurb in the little, the town newsletter that comes along with your water bill here in Lexington about, somebody's starting up a Lexington Community Concert Band, Lexington Community Band. And I'm like, really?
Interesting.
I wonder who's doing that, because, I think I know everybody around here. So I said, sure, I wasn't busy. I thought, well,
Right.
that'd be interesting. I'd like to meet some more people, and maybe I'll meet the same people I already know. I
Yeah.
don't know. And so I look into it, and it's being led by this guy, John Immerso, who I'd never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, who is this guy? I'm like,
From Long Island.
maybe. So I'm like, how do I not know this person? So I go online and I look up John Immerso.
Yeah.
Well, he went to the Crane School of Music.
Ah.
And I'm like, really? That's at SUNY Potsdam. That's where I went to school.
Yeah.
And I was in the music school over there. I wasn't a music major, but I played in the symphony. I played in the trombone ensemble. I played in the jazz band.
Yeah.
I was
Pretty plugged in.
I did everything except, declare as a music major.
Yeah.
I studied in the studio. I did all of the regular performing kind of stuff, but I didn't have to take composition. I didn't have to take a bunch of other things because I wasn't majoring in it. It was just these were all electives. I was just doing for fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I email John. And I'm like, well, hey, I said, yeah, I'm going to come join your band. I said, but looks like we might have gone to the same school.
Ah.
So I get over to the first rehearsal, and so I introduced myself, and he and Brian Clancy, and I said, so when were you all there in Potsdam at Crane? They're like, well, we were there only for like our junior and senior year, and then for 2 years of grad school to get their master's. So they were there for 4 years.
Yeah.
I said, well, okay, when? Well, we got there in '83, and we graduated in '87. I'm like, no shit, that's exactly the same time I was there.
How about that?
So I'm going, huh. So in '83, '84, where'd you live? Well, we were in the dorms. I said, well, so was I. Well, we were in Knowles North. I'm like, well, I was in Drame Hall. It's over here. I was like, okay. A lot of the music students were over in Knowles North because it's right across the street from the music school.
Right.
I'm like, well, that makes sense, but didn't run into. I said, how about the next year, their senior year, my sophomore year? And they said, yeah, we were still there in Knowles North. And I'm like, well, I was still over there in Drame Hall. Okay, so, all right. I said, well, third year, I moved off campus over to Main Street Apartments. They said, yeah, so did we. I'm like,
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
I said, so, second building on the left across the quad from the parking lot?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, yeah. I'm like, top of the stairs? And they said, no, one door down. I was at the top of the stairs.
Oh my gosh.
We were literal next door neighbors for a year.
Wow.
They had to walk by my apartment daily.
My goodness.
I never talked to them because they were music majors. I was a computer science major. God forbid you talk to the music kids.
And vice versa.
Exactly. So then I said, oh man, I'm like, really? This is too crazy.
Yeah.
So were you in any of the ensembles? They're like, yeah. I said, well, okay, in 83, 84, like in the fall of 83, were you in the symphony? Yeah. I'm like, really? I said, just to be sure, we did the Firebird Suite and Siegfried's Rhine Journey.
Right.
And I said, we went on a tour of New York.
Oh.
He said, yeah. There are pictures. I've pulled my yearbook out. There are pictures in the yearbook where we are, all three of us, in the same photograph. Here's Alan in the trombone section, and right behind me is John and Brian.
Oh, wow. That is...
And I never met them. They come moving here to town.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
Lexington, South Carolina, of all places.
Right, after I was already here.
Yeah.
And they open up a pizza joint. Ray's Pizza and Ice Cream.
Yep.
In a little strip plaza across from Best Buy.
Yep.
Like, Ray's Pizza and Ice Cream. Now, at the time, I was, Cardoni's here, which
I don't know if I have
it was like cardboard and ketchup. I mean, I don't mean to be pejorative, but it wasn't really very good. Otherwise, you had like the chains, the Domino's and the Papa John's and things. But I'm like, Ray's Pizza and Ice Cream. So I never went in. It just didn't seem attractive to me until they started the community band.
How about that?
And so I'm like, this is too coincidental.
Yeah.
That's my John and
That is
John
great.
Amerso and Brian Clancy story. We went to school together.
You've got to let me screenshot one of these photos you're talking about so I can whip it out the next time I go in there to pick up our pies. And two, mine was just the opposite. I played in the band before I walked into the restaurant and go, hey, we're pointing at each other. Hey, you.
I know you guys.
That was great. That's a great story. And nice that they have, we've kept playing on some level. They kept doing what they do, which they were band directors, right?
Yeah,
so
they taught for 25 years. They went to school as musicians
leading.
to become teachers. They taught for 25 years, and I think Brian was in Hop Hog, New York, out on the island, and John Amerso was in Sag Harbor.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have one of my best friends from college grew up in Sag Harbor, which is probably the only reason I remember that's.
I have a Sag Harbor story. Never mind.
It's one of those weird connections. And I'm like, so what brought you to Lexington of all places? And they're like, a builder.
Well,
their wives didn't want to be. It was getting expensive to live on the island, out on Long Island.
Yeah.
They were ready to retire. So their wives were like, we want to move someplace else. John and Brian have been friends since they were like young kids.
Yeah, to move together and work
do
business together. That's a pretty cool thing. I have a friend that I could do that with. We probably won't, but I've got that type of friend who we could. It's been. We've both pined a little bit that we never did do anything together, but we could have done that. We were kind of, we were good opposites in the way that we covered each other's deficiencies, if you will. It goes back to in high school science club doing projects where, he was the brain, he was the technician, and I loved doing the presentations. And if we tried to switch, it didn't work so well. But if we played the correct roles, it worked wonderfully. But those are great guys. I'm glad to have them here because of the pizza.
Yeah.
My wife is from upstate New York, not as upstate as you are.
Well, I was going to say, where upstate?
She's close enough in that she's still within range of where there's good New York style pizza.
So she's from what everybody usually thinks of when they think of upstate New York. But for people like me, we go, not exactly.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So where's she
from?
She's from the Hudson Valley, New Paltz area, across the river from Poughkeepsie. About 90 miles north of the city,
so my wife
up the Hudson River.
From just outside of Monticello.
Yep.
Which I bet you is not more than 30 minutes away.
That's right. Yeah, we talked about that. They're very close. It's amazing. I'll tell you, I've got a concrete contracting business now. We do a lot of residential, some
But
commercial
you're sure you're
work.
not Italian?
No, no. Where'd that come from? I'm everything but Irish, German, English.
I'm just thinking of like The Sopranos. You know, you're in the concrete contracting business.
Oh,
Like,
I got
oh
you.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure
Okay.
you are.
Now I see where you're going. Okay.
I know a guy whose father built Giant Stadium. Yeah.
Right. And some of the people who are buried there. The
Yeah.
where was I going with that?
Anyway, you're in the concrete.
Oh, yeah.
contracting
So I've got this. So I meet new people literally every day, and doing estimates and the contracting side of the business. And I think more than half of my customers now, even my customer prospects, whether they buy from us or not, is from somewhere else, and a great number is from the Northeast, from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. The whole Northeast, every state, at least one or two, but also West, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, really all over the country. But that amazes me. We're more cosmopolitan than a lot of people might realize.
So did you choose to come here when you guys came here, when you moved here, or was it because your job led you here?
Yeah, the job led me here. I mean, I chose to accept the job, but it was a promotion. So,
But it was within the same company.
Yes, always in the same company, and that was in the days, and maybe it's still that way, where, a promotion usually involved a move too. That's the way you climb the ladder, and so that's what brought me here.
But were you thinking you wanted to kind of be in the southeast, or?
Well, like I said, we were in
I mean, you were
North Carolina.
originally from North Carolina, so it was somewhat.
My wife Sharon had already told me, "Don't move me any farther south."
Where were you at the time?
We were in Wilson.
Okay.
And,
so you did exactly what she
we
told you
did
not to do.
exactly, and 10 degrees hotter and 20 degrees more humid, and she loves it. She loves it. Her blood is so thin now, she can't stand anything below 50 degrees. And, well, she can stand it, but she bundles up.
Well, I left northern New York in '87.
Yeah. And when we say northern, this is farther north than Toronto, Canada.
Oh, yes.
This is farther north than a good bit of Canada.
So
yeah, in case you
this is north of Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
This is northern New York.
Yeah.
The closest city is not Syracuse or Albany. Syracuse is like 2 hours away. Albany is probably 2.5 hours away from
Let
up
me
there.
guess. Montreal?
Montreal is the closest.
Montreal.
Actually, I think Ottawa is a little closer.
Okay.
But I think Montreal is maybe an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, a lot of the professors and whatever, on the weekends or whatever, they'd spend their weekends in Montreal.
Yeah.
But that's where I was going to school. And yes, when it was 50 degrees outside, we were outside in shorts and T-shirts.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Laying out on the grass, getting a tan.
Yeah.
Not that this white boy ever got a tan. I went from pale to pink. There was no tan in between. There was...
We have extended family out in Minneapolis area, Minnesota, and my wife's aunt would tell the story with not too much irony, just straight up, that they would wait for it to get up to 0 so that they could let the kids out to play. They didn't want them out there getting frostbit.
And they weren't talking about Celsius.
No, they didn't want them out there getting frostbit, but anything above 0 was tolerable. Yeah, go.
So
play.
I left that and went to South Florida. And
Where in the?
So I originally moved to, well, if you skip a week that I spent in Fort Lauderdale until I got a more or less normal place in Pompano Beach for about 2 weeks,
Okay.
right next to the blimp hangar, the Goodyear blimp
Oh,
hangar.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I used to see the Goodyear blimp coming in and out daily. And then I moved a little bit farther north to Deerfield Beach, and I lived there for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years
Okay.
anyway. Then I was in Delray Beach, a little bit further north.
Yeah.
So just on the north side of Boca Raton, somewhat. So I was working at IBM down there
Okay.
in Boca Raton for a good bit of that time.
Okay.
So Deerfield on the south side of it, Delray on the north side of it. Then I ended up in Boynton Beach, which is the next city, a little bit north of Delray. And then spent a year in Louisville on a job, went back to Florida, and then decided we're done with Florida. So I've been down in South Florida it was around 17, 18 years, I think we spent down there, or I spent down there. Met my wife down there.
So you are a true halfback.
Exactly. We decided we wanted the seasons, we wanted a little bit cooler weather. So to us, we were cooling off coming here.
Yeah, yeah.
Except for July.
Except for July and August, yeah.
It's like Orlando hot around here for
It's
that
got-
2-month time frame, but it's only 2 months.
It's just like being at the beach, except there's no ocean.
Yeah, and a lot of times there's no sea breeze.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the hottest day
Fair
I think
enough,
I ever saw in South Florida was maybe like 92 or 93 degrees. I don't think I ever saw a 100-degree temperature down there. It's tempered a lot by the ocean.
My daughter lived in Miami for several years, and she said it was never as hot there as it can get here.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's as hot as it is there for 6 months of the year.
That's true, the eternal summer.
But the other 6 months of the year is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
People used to say, you go to South Florida and you don't have seasons, and the people in South Florida will say, yes, you do. We have 4 seasons: early summer, midsummer, late summer, and next summer. Unlike the people in Louisville that have, four seasons: fall, winter, spring, and construction.
That sounds like several states I've been in up and down the East Coast.
Yeah.
Especially the road construction part.
Yeah, so I will say that coming here, we came here for the seasons. I find it a little bit chilly here in the wintertime, but I've acclimated. But I got acclimated in Florida. So, I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been 30 plus years, 35 years since I've spent any time in the winter up north.
I guess I would tire of it quickly. We just clamor for that snow accumulation, that snowfall that we can get out there and see everything white.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'd tire of it quickly.
As an adult, I
perpetuated.
never lived in the north. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when I graduated college, literally like 2 weeks after college, I was in Florida.
I don't know if we've talked about this or if I've asked you this question, but I'll start by saying, with these customers, these new people that I meet constantly, I'm ever curious, how did you get here? And the answers, the majority of the answers come either under my kids here and I followed them, and that often has a tie to the university, or a job, or we just wanted to get out of the winters. That's a biggie. And it doesn't always, we kind of continue on how does that equate to Lexington, and that's different ways. But now it's often as simple as just internet searches of places that look pretty nice and
Well, that's what
reasonably
brought John
priced.
Russo and Brian Clancy here. Their wives literally looked for a builder. And the builder had a model that they could look at here.
Yeah.
So they came down to see the model, and
Yeah.
they're like, this is where we're staying.
I've had numerous customers who bought a house based on buying online, but never sight unseen. They never came here before they actually purchased a home.
Would you ever do that?
No.
Really?
I did.
How close to that have you ever been?
Well, the closest was I wound up buying the house that I said, based on online pictures and location and stuff, I said, I like this. It's the first one I wanted to see. It's the last one we saw, and we bought the house. That's the closest. And I probably could have just said, yep, let's just do it. But also had a chance when we moved, and this was Wilson, North Carolina again. I was running 3 months ahead of the family, which has always been very helpful for me because I can just concentrate solely on the job. I don't have to concern with whether the family's adjusting and the particulars of a new area and moving into a new place. It would be at a extended stay or an apartment rental, and I'm just doing my thing 12 hours a day in the office or
Get
whatever.
established, but also learn a little bit of the lay of the land.
Yeah, and then I can go out evenings or weekends and look at houses and things. And so I knew even before Sharon came down that was still the place I wanted. And after 30 viewings later of all around the area, we came back to that one.
I came up here, we basically threw darts at a map and picked Lexington for a lot of different reasons. And then I got a job with Blue Cross. And
So you came before the job.
well, I came before the job, but I had the job and I had 2 weeks or something like that. So I came up in that interim time and did a little looking around. Then I went back. Then I came back up and moved into a hotel for a couple of weeks because I was waiting for the closing on the house. Basically, in that first trip up here, I'm like, my job is to find a house. And I take my job seriously, so I found a house. And I didn't think it mattered to me that much. Like it just has to be a house that I can live in for the next couple of years. Probably won't stay there. I want to be up on the lake. This is where I want to be. Don't want to be, someplace else, but I, wanted someplace that was okay. But I wasn't. The standards weren't so much for me. My wife likes to jog, or at that time she did a lot of jogging and running. So I needed a neighborhood where there was enough place to do that.
Yeah. Well, this is great.
We wanted, enough light in the house, and we had a couple of parrots, and so we needed, a room that would accommodate the parrots properly, and so on and so forth. And
Did you say parrots or parents?
parrots, birds.
Okay, just checking. Okay.
We actually had parents too, but
Not living with you at the time.
no. And so in any case, I came up and I'm like, well, okay, it doesn't matter too much. But I was coming up from Boca Raton, Florida. I was coming up from South Florida, which is, that's a weird area. I mean, living and working around Palm Beach, the town of Palm Beach, the island right on the ocean, Boca Raton, very fancy, very, very well manicured. And I mean, I once heard it said about Palm Beach, it's where it's statistically possible for two Rolls Royce to run into each other.
Absolutely.
And that's a world that it's frankly one of the reasons we left, was that we didn't want to raise a child in that environment because you'd have a skewed view of the world. So if my daughter hears this, yes, you have a skewed view of the world, but it has nothing to do with where you grew up. I may have to cut that out, but I probably won't. But in any case, that was what drove us up here. But having come from that, I'm driving around here, riding around with a realtor, and she's showing me this place and that place, and I'm like, what have I done? Because it's not the manicured world that South Florida is. And I was a little bit concerned, I'll be quite honest with you, until I actually met the people.
Okay.
And that's when I learned, don't judge a book by its cover.
Right.
Just because that store over there is, just a simple steel building or something, doesn't mean you aren't going to meet the best people in the world on the inside. Just because this restaurant looks a little run down doesn't mean that food in there is not going to be fantastic. It is going to be. And that's what we found Lexington to be. And that was also an election year. And here in town, we were electing a new mayor. Randy Halfacre was running, and I don't recall if he was an incumbent or if he was the new mayor.
He's the first one I remember, so it may have been a re-election. I'm not sure.
But met him
we're
over
only a year
here
apart
at a local neighborhood gathering they were having for it, and I was talking to him, and I said, do me a favor, now that I'm here, close the gates behind me. Because I'm leaving South Florida, and I see what happened to that in the last 20 years. It changed incredibly. The population that moved into Florida, I mean, Florida still brings people in, but it changed the complete feeling of it down there. And I said, this town is great because of what it is and what it was, not what it's going to become.
Yeah. So
he didn't close the gates.
My
not that the mayor can. I mean,
we're in a cul-de-sac, and my neighbor 2 doors around, also not from here, but came here for work. He's a planning director. He was the director of the Midlands Council of Governments, which is kind of a collective to help make decisions on planning and roads and things like that. And he gave me the name for what you just described. It's called the drawbridge syndrome. It's like you move into the castle, and then you want that drawbridge raised up so it stays like it is. And I agree, and I'm the same way. And that's probably why it's probably why we had that conversation, or why he gave me that description. When we moved here, Route 6 was a 2-lane road, all the way from the intersection across the dam, and obviously it heads north and remains a 2-lane road now, but it was a 2-lane road. We almost bought a home in a neighborhood on 6, but we found out that was going to be widened, and that there would be all the construction and the disruption and the lane closure, that. So we didn't, for that reason.
Yeah, but I was at Wingard Nursery the other day.
Which I live close by.
Looking out at the traffic coming around Pilgrim Church
if it wasn't there, yeah.
North Lake.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. I know it's not simple, and it's the putting the toothpaste back in the tube.
The answer is embrace it, because there's nothing wrong with the people that are coming in. In fact,
nothing wrong with the people. It's the problem is the congestion. That growth brings some of the issues that you also face, road rage.
But it becomes its own self-limiting factor.
Yeah.
If you accommodate that, which is, you could look at South Florida as being the thing. You had roads just on a grid.
Yeah.
And they could widen a 2-lane road out to 6 lanes.
Yeah.
And they did. Guess what? Traffic fills up 6 lanes. Oh, you got 6 lanes here?
Absolutely.
Now I can build this subdivision, this subdivision, and this subdivision, and this subdivision. Next thing you know, you've got 10,000 people living where only
and like you
500
said, back to the
before
drawbridge syndrome is what changed in the course of that 2-lane road becoming 6-lane. It's like, the old Cherokee with the building of the new school, and the tree canopy disappearing in favor of road widening. It's still beautiful. The area is still wonderful. The traffic is what it is, and you deal with that. But it's those changes that make Lexington different than it was when it attracted us here.
And there's an element that, you want to think that, oh man, it was better the way it was. But no.
No, as far as
25 years ago, you didn't have all this.
Right.
So this is certainly an improvement.
Right. Well, the thing is also, to that, back to that drawbridge syndrome thing again, is there are places that have controlled their growth in a way. There's Cambridge, Massachusetts is almost within sight of Boston, Massachusetts, if you get up high enough. It is, because they in the Revolution they were back and forth, and Paul Revere and everything. Boston is a driver's nightmare. I have a brother-in-law who lives an hour outside, and that 1 hour commute can be 2.5. You know what? And but Cambridge is still Cambridge. It's still tree-lined streets, birds chirping, and so.
And I bet their taxes are pretty high too.
Taxes are ridiculous.
Because Palo Alto in California, for example, is like that too.
Yeah. Okay.
But you can
pay for it.
You can.
And
you
property
can kind of force the
values
issue.
are. Yeah. The reason my brother-in-law is an hour outside of Boston is because that's that's as close as he can be and have a mortgage and buy a house.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's I have a Boston story. I'm a big Boston Bruins fan, and so I'm sitting here thinking, an hour away might be as close as I would want to be too, because man, it's so frustrating sometimes to be a sports fan.
That's right. You guys up there, you had a choice. It's like the Patriots being the New England team, because we have family in Vermont and they're Patriots fans because that's the closest football team.
Well, I mean, I grew up 35, 40 minutes east of Buffalo, 35, 40 minutes west of Rochester, out in western New York.
Okay.
Near Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Rochester, but it's dairy country. I mean, really, it's just another part of Ohio. There's nothing New Yorkish about it, other than New York is a big state, and there's a lot of... New York is a fabulous place to be. If it weren't for New Yorkers, New York would be just fantastic. And by New Yorkers, I mean the government. 99.9% of the residents of the state are
wonderful,
awesome people.
They really, and I mean that sincerely. They really are. I love being up there. I love New Yorkers who move here.
Just the geography, the variety, the mountains, the valleys, the wine country, the Finger Lakes region, Long Island.
The wings, the beef on the wick.
I just had wings for lunch today too. And
the frozen custard. You put me on to Abbott's. That was you.
Did I do that to you?
Yeah. My son is at Eastman. He's in his senior year. And so you told me when I told you I was going to be going up to Rochester. So
And so you've found Abbott's frozen custard, and have you found that they're in Greer? Greer, South Carolina.
No,
they
I didn't
have
know
an
that.
Abbott's in Greer.
Oh my gosh.
And it is every bit as good.
No, I thought you were talking there because there's a similar
Greece.
town, Greece, up in that area.
No.
That's right.
Greer, South Carolina has an Abbott's, and it is every bit as good. So if you're jonesing for Abbott's, it's not that far away. Now, what happens, my neighbor 2 doors down here is also from Rochester.
Okay.
And I went up to Greer, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, and brought him back a couple quarts of Abbott's, because his son has never had it before.
Yeah.
Had never been up there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you can't have all this yourself. You're going to have to share this with your boy.
Garbage plates.
Yeah. But I mean, New York is a beautiful place. But I don't know where I was going with that. But it's every place has its attributes, the things that are good and bad about it. And, I look at the growth here, and on one hand, I could sit here and complain about traffic, but then I went to Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and, I'm sorry, don't complain about traffic until you've been to Atlanta. Then you can complain about traffic.
Yeah.
I worked for a while in Palo Alto and in LA and San Francisco and Oakland. And don't complain about traffic. I mean, I used to complain about the traffic in South Florida. But, yes, it's busy down there, but it's not like it is out in California. And then I moved here, and I'd go to work at Blue Cross, and people would complain about the traffic. I'm like, really? I live 18 miles away. It takes me 18 minutes to get here.
Right, yeah.
I get here in less time from Lexington than it takes you to get here from Lake Carolina.
Right.
And this was going over to the tower over off of Alpine Road.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't have traffic here. You have traffic. You don't have rush hour. You have rush 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If you just avoid those 5 minutes, you're good.
Yeah.
Now today, it's not anywhere near. It's a lot worse than it was. There's no doubt.
Well, yeah, but that 18-minute commute to work probably hasn't increased a lot, but it might take you the same amount of time to go to the flight deck.
That said, I work from home now and have worked from home for about 13 years, and my commute's about 18 seconds.
Yeah, so there you go.
My biggest problem is I never get to leave work.
It's not the traffic with me as much as now I have to remember what things used to look like, where there's now another sprawling 250 home complex. I'm remembering the horse farm or the what have you.
But I like some of the restaurants and bars.
Yeah.
The amphitheater brings in a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
good
yeah,
music.
yeah.
There is, I mean, a lot of people to meet. I've gone into places and tried to just, introduce myself or just talk to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And the people that you meet, I mean,
Oh, it's amazing.
it's like you find out that here is somebody that was your next door neighbor 30
Yeah.
years ago, 35 years ago, and now they're making pizza.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
is that Lexington? Is that unique to Lexington? Or does every town have this? It must.
Not the one that I grew up in. Where I grew up has been amazingly unchanged, and that's because it's just there's not that it's not. It's a wonderful area, and I didn't realize until I moved away. It's beautiful. It's Piedmont, green. It's a really beautiful area, but it doesn't have the draws. It doesn't have the right or large enough industry or attractions or whatever.
And you haven't moved back.
No, that's right. That's right. And the area really hasn't grown nearly.
Right.
Literally, the little town is called Seagrove, and it's a pottery capital of a lot of area because there's a lot of it that goes on. There were 200 people within the little town limits. That was the population when I was growing up, and it seemed like I heard when I was back there a while back, the official population is like 273 now. But that's okay. Now I'm not complaining.
No, it's a nice place to visit, but
Yeah.
this is where you stop and think, well, wait a minute, there's been all this growth here,
Yeah.
but this is actually more attractive. That's why the growth is here.
Yeah, that's right. You've got the lake, you've got the university, you've got some really great industry. I'm always more amazed as I travel around in my contracting business at what we see in terms of, big business, for the pharma and manufacturing. And
So it seems like after corporate life, where you, for how many years were you with what eventually became CMEX? Is it still CMEX over there?
Yeah. Well, no. That's part of the departure. There was it changed and rebranded and renamed so many times, and I eventually became kind of just an old guy there off in the hinterlands or something. But
So how did you get from that to Sam's?
Yeah.
And
So
what's the full name of this? Sam's.
It's Sam the Concrete Man.
Sam the Concrete Man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I tried one other corporate job after I left. It was a 26-year career in the concrete products industry, and I tried one other corporate job, and I could tell that was not going to, be a long-term thing. And so I've come from a family of self-employed folks. My father was a builder and real estate person. My grandfather was a house builder, self-employed, and so there's always been that little bit of a niggle there. But also being from a family of self-employed people kind of drove me to that steady Eddie, job, that regular paycheck and things. Because as a kid, you can remember listening from the den and hearing the conversations around the dinner table about, where's the next check going to come from, type thing. Now, my father did well, don't get me wrong, but there's, there can be scary and lean times in probably most any business, but in particular in the real estate and housing and things like that. And so I think that kind of drove me toward, now I don't want to have to worry. I don't want to have to sit at home after working all day and then worrying about, are we going to cover the bills and things like that.
And if you're neurotic like me, then you worry anyway.
So that probably had some, but anyway, that little niggle of self-employment, of entrepreneurship was always there. And so I started looking at opportunities for something where I would have some help, where I wasn't literally cold starting up on my own, like the fellas with Claren Rays, or like our friend Matt has done with the public house there on Main Street. You know, that's like just I'm all in. It's got to work. It has to work. You know, I wasn't quite ready to. So I bought the territories from this company that covers the Columbia Metro and surrounding counties, and then I followed up a couple of years later with Augusta, Georgia, expanded down into Augusta, and I don't remember what the original question was.
How you jumped
Yeah,
from
So it
corporate
was
into
just
Sam's or Sam the Concrete
Yeah.
Man, because, well, gee, it seems to match. You were making big concrete blocks,
yeah.
and now you're making driveways.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of the lingo and the understanding of, you know, the properties of concrete and things like that fit, but there's a lot that was just brand new to me too. Flat work, ready mix type, what we called in the precast industry wet cast, which is, you know, something that's got to set up and cure on its own versus what we manufactured was by machine. So there's plenty of differences. So it doesn't line up exactly, but it helped. You know, it helped some comfort level that I can speak the lingo type thing, and but it wasn't driven. It was really more the guy who was working with me and exploring different types of businesses. He's the one who threw it out and said, "Hey, maybe you ought to check these guys out." And so it wasn't the fact that it was a concrete business completely. It was also their particular program, their particular process, and their support and cost of buy-in and everything. So it was just it seemed like anything is a risk, but it seemed like a risk that I felt like I could manage well, and we've been very successful. Little old Columbia, I like to brag, we've brought home a national championship here within the Samco Corporation company. We've been Franchise of the Year and received several awards, the top revenue producer and things like that. So it's been kind of fun.
How many miles a year do you put on your vehicle?
28,000. Not to be specific or anything, but I know what that.
Yeah, I know you know what that number is.
Yeah,
Of course you do.
Yeah, as many of the other numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, because
all within an hour of Columbia.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
That's business
Again,
miles.
my aforementioned daughter, I think she's averaged, it's north of 20,000.
Wow.
But she does a lot of driving. She's young, so she's like, I want to go to Charleston for the weekend, or I want to go to Charleston today for just down and back. And you're like,
my 28,000 doesn't include my other travel. Those are business miles, and it's in 150 and 200 mile increments.
I have to go out of my way to leave the house.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
I have a 2016 model year car, and I think I'm up to 63,000 miles on it, maybe. And I bought it used with 39,000, I think, on it. So
wow.
I maybe have put 24,000 miles on this, and I've had it for 4 years, so I'm averaging like 6,000 a year. Well, and that is only for the few trips we make to Florida, to go visit family and things like that.
Well, that was
without even having the
something
commute,
I was
man, it's something else.
looking forward to after the corporate career was a change of scenery, getting out from behind the desk. Mm-hmm. Now, working at home, that's pretty cool. But I have got to know our area so much better in the last several years just by riding those roads. And I thought I had been on every peninsula, every cove on Lake Murray, and I still haven't. And we do a lot of work literally all the way around the lake. And I'm still finding new roads and new little outcroppings and coves and things. It's amazing. So.
Yeah, I I did some bike riding for a while, and that familiarized with me with a lot of the roads, kind of the west of town here, where you can get away from traffic.
Yeah.
And I've always prided myself on being familiar with the local road system. Although when I was young, growing up in Western New York, I did not know the roads there very well. I don't know why. It became something that I was much more familiar with, but I think it became easy for me in Florida because everything's on a grid. It goes north-south or it goes east-west.
Right.
And there's like 5 roads that go north-south,
Yeah.
so you haven't got to figure many of those out, and then everything else is just a rung on the ladder.
Yeah.
And it was, wherever you're going, it's the northeast corner or the southwest corner or whatever of these 2 roads.
Right.
And I know if I'm in this road, I can go that way to hit that road, and then go south until I hit
Yeah.
it wasn't that hard.
Right.
Here, it is way different, and yeah, it's hard. Just driving through town sometimes, I'm trying to visualize the map to know, well, is it shorter for me to go over here, or is it going to be quicker if I take, Mineral Springs Road and Cedar Road to come over from the other side? It's good to know some of these, but I haven't been in and out of all the neighborhoods.
As much as I've prided myself my whole life on direction and not getting lost, and if I go there, I can not only get back, but I can get back there again, recall and things. I use GPS regularly because, one, I can take calls or think about other things while GPS is telling me what to do, but also it's those shortcuts that are just like, my gosh, I've 20 years and I never knew I could get from here to there this quickly.
Yeah.
It is fun. It's kind of neat.
So here to
especially
there,
around town too.
Here to there is a good segue.
Yeah.
How'd you get on your whiskey journey?
Well,
what's your whiskey story?
What's my whiskey story? The Sharon and I have tried to do a trip of some sort for every 5-year anniversary, and for our because prior to this trip, I really didn't drink hard liquor much at all. I've never been much a mixed drink guy that much, just beer now and then, and good beer or whatever. But so our 10th anniversary, which would have been 28 years ago now, we went with another couple, good friends from Asheboro, a school chum going all the way back for me, and his wife. We went to Great Britain, and we flew into Gatwick and rented a car, and we headed north up, I guess it's the east side of England.
So to go see Robin Hood up in the Sherwood Forest.
Where Sherwood
Nottingham.
Forest? We went up. It's one of the striking areas. We went through Stratford. We toured the Shakespeare's home and the theater and it was the Lake District, which is just gorgeous. That's where Peter Rabbit. What's that author's name? The story.
I'm lucky I can remember your name.
But anyway, this was her home, and we're the setting for her adventures of the bunnies and everything, and just gorgeous country. And we went up into Scotland, up not all the way to the Highlands, but about midway. We crossed from Glasgow over to Edinburgh, and I did get a little side trip to St. Andrews, and actually didn't play, but got to have lunch.
I can't imagine I would ever play golf at
St. Andrews. But yeah, well, the funny thing is I could have walked on. This was a cool late fall day, and this guy who was just,
as I recall, if I'm thinking of the right thing, it's like the road is here, and not more than 5 or 6 feet away is one of the tee boxes for.
There's a hole called the road hole, that if you go a little awry, it'll go rolling across and down the road. Yeah, flat as a pancake. It's one of the least pretty courses you've ever seen, but just that history will just
the history,
grab you. We went into Old Tom Morris's golf shop, had to buy some souvenirs. But this fella, He's like out of Central Casting, comes walking down the street. He's got the knickers, whatever, the tam
Tam-o'-shanter.
yeah, cap, the white mustache, just as distinguished looking, the tie, the vest, and he comes strolling up and, hey, so where are you from? Are you gonna play today? And he goes, yeah, I only play 3-4 times a week myself. And I was like, are you kidding me? And he said, yeah, that's my place up there. And he pointed up to a flat, literally it was about right over Tom Morris's golf shop, just overlooking the whole, that main clubhouse they have, the Royal and Ancient and everything. And it was just.
Can you imagine that?
He would have gotten me on.
How did you get to that? How do you get to be, I'm the guy that lives there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I play 3 or 4 times a week over here at St. Andrews because why not?
Not only would I love to have spent some time with that guy and hearing his story, but he would have gotten me on the course if I wasn't traveling with 2 women, my wife and my friend's wife. Dean actually my friend actually had a business meeting, and that was part of the tie-in with this trip. And he was in Glasgow, and we spent this day on our own. I would have played St. Andrews as a walk-on if I wouldn't have been leaving 2 ladies stranded for 5 hours. That just wasn't going to work.
I'm sure they would have figured out what to do with their 5 hours.
Yeah. Oh, it's one of those.
Oh, credit card shopping. See
I don't have many regrets. I don't look back. I don't regret. That's just not me. But well.
So anyway, that led you up into Scotland.
Yeah. So when we were in England, I was drinking beer. Right, trying the
English
ales,
beer probably wasn't
the room temperature, and drawing up from the cellar and everything. In Scotland, it was Scotch, and so I became just like here. We have towns have their microbreweries, and this is really popular here, and that style is really popular there, or whatever. Well, you've got the same thing in Scotland, and it has a lot to do, I think, with their geology and geography in terms of what the flavor of their. It has something to do, I think, at least with what the flavor of their scotches are like. So I was on just taste testing my way around a loop of Scotland. Every town we stopped, every opportunity.
Getting the local, fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The stuff they bottle up and send overseas or wherever. It's
yeah. And just like probably like going on the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky or something, there's just something going to Napa, right? And tasting the wines that, next door to the cellars and things.
It's in the air, not just in the bottle. It's all in the air, and that changes things.
And in the ground. And so I got to see how peat was harvested, right? And I didn't see the whole process, but I understand what peat is and how it's used and how it informs the flavor of
it's amazing how much that sticks with the final product.
Yeah. There's so much variety, just like with beer, and color and body and the whole 9 yards is just that same way with Scotch whiskeys. And again, like doing the wine tour in Napa, you can appreciate the whites and the reds, but you still kind of have your favorites. And the ones I tried there are not the ones that are readily available. They're not the ones you're going to find on shelves here, but I'm perfectly happy with the ones that we do find on shelves here, some more than others.
So you kind of had an introduction to Scotch from the ground.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
And so was it just like, well, I'd like to kind of explore what the other options are. You got back here, and you're like, well, let me.
That more came with maybe somebody like you said, hey, you want to try this? And I love, bourbons can be terrific. Rye whiskeys. I haven't tried I don't know Irish whiskey so well, but I guess there's something like in terms of what is your go-to. I don't know if I just developed a taste for it there, and that was kind of like, if you are Italian, you eat pasta, right? And so if that's, whatever. But because I'm English and Irish, that's kind of my heritage. So I don't know how that ties into it versus if I had gone to Kentucky first. If that trip had been to Kentucky, maybe I'd be a bourbon guy now.
Well, I mean, a lot of that is still Scotch-Irish settled.
Yeah.
I mean, the Appalachians is filled with Scotch-Irish,
Right.
which is how we got a lot of the stuff that we got in the first place. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about, like, they don't make rye the same way they used to make rye whiskey. So, in fact, these guys with ASW up here, they used to drink rye in college, but it was an Appalachian recipe. And people didn't make it that way anymore. And they make a rye. It's 100% rye in the mash bill, and it's malted rye, no less. And, like, who does that? Almost nobody does. And so, actually, when I was there a couple of weeks ago, and I was there visiting there with a friend of mine, we went into there at the bar, and talking to him, and I'm thinking, yeah, this would make total sense that they would use malted rye, because probably some Scotsman came over from Scotland where they malted their barley to make their scotch.
Yeah.
So of course he would come here and malt whatever the grain is he had.
Sure. Right.
And rye grows almost anywhere. It's easier to grow than a lot of other grains.
Right.
So he probably had some rye on hand. We're like, well, I'm going to make a whiskey. What do? You malt it. That's how you get the extra sugars out of it.
Sure.
So it makes total sense that that's what you would do in the Appalachians,
Right.
because that's where the Scots went.
Okay.
But until you stop and think about that, you're like, wow, who does that?
Right.
Well, yeah, and it's like Japanese whiskey. Japanese whiskey is Scotch, made in Japan. Well, why is that? Well, because there was one guy who started the Japanese whiskey industry. He was from Scotland. And he met a Japanese girl, fell in love. She didn't want to live in Scotland, so they moved to Japan. But he's like, yeah, but I'm still making whiskey. So he started making whiskey with the way he knew how, which was Scotch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of similarities between Japanese whiskey and Scotch.
It's like the guys from New York come and say, I'm going to live in Lexington, but I'm still going to make pizza.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And but that's, to kind of circle back to the whole, we've become this melting pot a little bit. That's what is part of what makes it interesting around here. Right. And maybe the price is that there's greater traffic. I'm not sure how much I'm going to really say that's a big price. It's something to be managed, but it's, like we were talking before we started this about, why do we suffer? And growth. Why do we have the challenges in life? So that you can overcome them.
Right.
So that you can learn to appreciate, oh, wait a minute. There's 10,000 people that are here today that weren't here 20 years ago. But there's some really interesting people in that 10,000. Yeah. And how cool is it that you get to go meet them?
Yeah.
And how cool is it that you find out that one of these guys, two of these guys were your next door neighbors, years and years back?
Yeah.
Or how cool is it that one of the guys you met here was, a trombone player in Pershing's own U.S. Army Band in Washington, D.C., and now he's pushing buttons at Blue Cross.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Yeah.
But because, like the rest of us that figured out that musicians wasn't exactly a great career choice, it's an awesome hobby choice.
Yeah, there you go.
So beyond the Scotches, you said you're not a huge fan of Irish. You just haven't explored that
No,
much.
I just don't know it that well. Yeah.
What's your familiarity with anything local? I mean, anything that's, let's say, not the big names out of Kentucky, but
It's not really. I buy single malt that usually starts with a Glen. I'd hit the high spots. You're the guy who does the deep dive.
Well,
right?
I'm fascinated by all this stuff, which, much to my chagrin, has certainly added to my inventory.
But not the bank account.
Well, the hardship is, honestly, it's like you work from home,
Yeah.
right? So it's 5 o'clock happy hour is 5 o'clock happy hour.
Yeah.
In fact, if you're not careful, it starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You just make
you're
sure
making
you
me
don't have
jealous
a meeting
now.
at 3:30 or something like that, where you've got to
Right.
be on camera or talking to somebody, or you find out that the guy you're talking to is a tequila aficionado, and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to
Well-
pour a little tequila here, and we'll share a tequila as part of the work experience, because working from home is not really what it's cracked up to be. I mean, it does have its advantages,
Yeah.
but for years I worked in offices, and I looked forward to going out to lunch.
Yeah.
And you met people, you went places, you got different food, you had a lot more close relationships. Now, the people that I work with, one of them actually does live here, quite coincidentally, but I've only been working with him for a couple of years. He's now around on the north side of the lake up near Chapin. But everybody else is Huntsville, Alabama, Toronto, and Montreal.
Oh, wow.
One of the guys, like I had this meeting with a guy today, he's in Nova Scotia. Another guy that I was consulting with a little bit online today is in New Brunswick. Another guy I'm supposed to be dealing with is in Houston.
Fellows to go visit, for sure.
Well, yeah, and except in the wintertime. But it's nice to be able to talk to people. I found out, like, two of the guys I work with are in Montreal, but one of them is French.
Oh,
And
sure.
one of them is French-Canadian. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
Their language is different.
Yeah.
Yes, they both speak French, and yes, they
Yeah.
understand each other quite well. It's not so much that they speak a different language, they swear differently.
Funny.
I found that out. They pronounce the TH differently.
Right.
In Quebec, they pronounce TH like a D.
Yeah.
In France, they pronounce TH like a Z. So Inspector Clouseau is French.
Okay.
He's Parisian.
Yeah.
So it's like Z thing and Z this
Oh,
and Z
yeah.
that. And,
Gotcha.
but the French Canadian, the guy in Montreal would be, this and that, and, so on and so
Oh,
forth.
funny.
You just see, like the guy from France, English is his third language. So I'm like, really?
Wow.
English, what's your second language? German.
Ooh.
I'm like, were you preparing for them to come back?
Again.
But he's from Strasbourg, which is on the border with Germany, so
Oh,
it makes total sense once you
sure.
figure it out.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting to be able to talk to a bunch of people from different areas and kind of
Yeah.
to learn a little bit more about it. But you're not really there with them.
Right.
But the other side of that problem is that, well, it's 5 o'clock. Okay, it's happy hour. You want to have a little cocktail. It takes you a half hour to figure out what you want.
Well, I've been.
The menu is too big.
I agree. It's hard to know where to start, especially when I'm here just a short time. I've got to get that. I got to get that invite back for sure, because I've spotted some bottles that would have to be another trip.
Well, I think that's going to be a great place to wind it up. We will get the invite back. I'll get you on the short list.
Awesome. Yeah.
But Dwayne, it was great to have you here, man.
Great to catch up. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm
Thanks
looking
a lot.
forward to what else we can get out of this town and just living out a fabulous life. So.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks for
Thanks.
having me. All right.